I've never been someone who is easily scared. I grew up watching horror movies and listening to creepy podcasts, but I always told myself those things were just stories. They weren't real. At least that's what I thought until this happened. This was about a year ago. I was living alone in a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place in a pretty quiet neighborhood. I'd been there for a few months and everything had been fine. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect anything bad to happen. That night started out normal enough. I had just finished eating dinner and was settling in to watch some TV. It was a Friday, so I was looking forward to just relaxing and maybe sleeping in the next day. Around 9 p.m, the power went out. At first, I didn't think much of it. The building was kind of old and I figured it was just a blown fuse or something. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight so I could find some candles. While I was rummaging through the drawer, I noticed something weird. The lights in the apartment across the street were still on. My apartment was completely dark, but everyone else seemed to have power. That didn't make sense to me. I went to my breaker box and flipped a few switches, but nothing happened. The power was still out. I texted my landlord to let him know, but he didn't respond right away. I decided to just deal with it for the night. I lit a couple of candles and tried to watch something on my phone, but I couldn't focus. The darkness made the apartment feel different, like it wasn't really mine anymore. As I was sitting there, I heard a noise. It was faint at first, like a soft thud, but it was enough to make me pause. I turned off the video I was watching and listened. There it was again, a thud, followed by what sounded like shuffling. I told myself it was probably just my upstairs neighbor. The guy who lived above me was always dropping stuff, so I figured that was all it was. But then I heard it again, and this time it sounded like it was coming from inside my apartment. I froze. My heart started pounding and I felt this weird heavy weight in my chest. I tried to convince myself I was just imagining it, but then I heard it again, closer this time. It was coming from the hallway. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight back on. The light bounced off the walls as I made my way toward the hallway. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. I checked every room, first the bathroom, then the bedroom, then the tiny closet near the front door. Nothing. The doors were locked and the windows were shut. I was starting to feel a little silly. I figured maybe the noise had been coming from outside, or maybe it was just the building settling. I went back to the living room, trying to shake off the weird feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I noticed the front door. It was unlocked. I was 100% sure I had locked it earlier. I always double-checked the locks before sitting down for the night. My stomach dropped. I slowly walked over and locked it again, twisting the deadbolt as quietly as I could. Then I backed away, trying to figure out what to do. My landlord still hadn't texted me back, and I didn't feel like this was enough of an emergency to call the police. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I decided to check the door again, just to be sure. When I reached for the deadbolt, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were scratches around the lock. I don't know how I hadn't noticed them before. Deep, jagged scratches, like someone had been trying to force the lock open. I stepped back, my mind racing. If someone had been trying to break in, why hadn't they finished the job? That's when I heard it, a creak coming from the bedroom. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My legs didn't want to move, but somehow I forced myself to walk toward the bedroom. My phone's flashlight was shaking in my hand, casting weird, jagged shadows on the walls. The door was half open. I hadn't left it like that. Is someone there?" I whispered, but no answer. I pushed the door open with my foot and shined the light around the room. Nothing looked out of place. The bed was still made, the closet door was closed and the window was locked. But then I noticed something else. The blanket at the foot of my bed was bunched up like it had been moved. I stepped closer, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I reached out and pulled the blanket back, half expecting to see something or someone hiding underneath. There was nothing there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with my phone in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, waiting for the sun to come up. The next morning, I called my landlord and told him everything. He came over to check the logs and said they looked fine to him. When I showed him the scratches, he shrugged and said they were probably old. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A week later, I moved out. To this day, I don't know if someone was in my apartment that night or if my mind was just playing tricks on me. But every time I hear a strange noise in the dark, I remember the sound of those footsteps, and I wonder, what if I hadn't locked the door? So, this happened a few months ago, and honestly, I still get chills when I think about it. I live in a pretty basic apartment complex, not super nice, but not sketchy either. Just your average middle of the road place. It's a 2-bedroom I share with my buddy Marcus, though he wasn't home that night. A couple of days before it happened, the management sent out a notice about planned maintenance. They said the power would be out overnight, starting around 9 pm, and wouldn't be back until early the next morning. Something about upgrading the electrical system for the whole building. They apologized for the inconvenience and told everyone to plan accordingly. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, blackouts happen. I figured I'd just go to bed early or use my phone until I fall asleep. No big deal. But that night turned out to be one of the scariest of my life. The day of the blackout, Marcos left for work around 5 pm. He works overnight shifts, so I was on my own. Before he left, he joked, "Don't let the blackout monsters get you." I laughed it off and told him to shut up. The power went out right on schedule, just as the notice said it would. At first, it was kind of eerie but not scary. The whole complex went dark at once. You know how when the power's out, everything feels weirdly quiet. No humming fridge, no background noise, just silence. I lit a couple of candles in the living room and kitchen, mostly so I wouldn't trip over anything. I even grabbed my old battery-powered camping lantern and set it up in my room. Then I settled on the couch with my phone, scrolling through social media and playing some games to kill time. About an hour in, I started hearing noises from the outside. At first it was just little things, doors opening and closing, faint footsteps on the stairs. Nothing unusual really. People coming and going, probably annoyed about the blackout. But then I heard something that didn't sit right. It was this faint click-click sound, like metal on metal. It came from down the hall, near the main entrance to the building. I figured it was someone fumbling with their keys in the dark, trying to get into their apartment. But then I remembered something. Our building has these magnetic locks on all the main doors, front, back, and stairwells. They're designed to lock automatically when the power's on. But with the electricity out, the locks wouldn't work. Anyone could just walk right in. The thought made me a little uneasy, but I tried not to dwell on it. I mean, we live in a decent area. It's not like people are just waiting for the power to go out so they can break in, right? Then I heard it again, louder this time. Click, click, click. It was closer now, maybe on my floor. I paused my game and turned off the sound on my phone. The only light in the room was from the candle flickering on the coffee table. I sat there, straining to hear. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving down the hallway outside my apartment. My heart started pounding. I got up as quietly as I could and peeked through the peephole in the door. The hallway was pitch black, so I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the footsteps getting closer. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone. I thought about calling Marcus, but what was he supposed to do? He was miles away at work. Then I thought about calling the cops, but I didn't even know if anything was really happening. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I froze. My hand tightened around my phone and I held my breath. There was this long, terrifying silence. Then I heard the doorknob jiggle. It wasn't just a light touch either. Whoever it was, they were trying to turn it. Hard. The door was locked, but that didn't make me feel much better. I wanted to yell out, to scare them off, but my throat felt like it was glued shut. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. Then I heard a voice, low, muffled, like they were talking to someone else. Check the next one. The footsteps started again, moving past my door. I felt a wave of relief, but it didn't last long. Whoever it was, they were checking the apartments. Maybe they were just trying doors to see if anyone forgot to lock theirs. Or maybe They were looking for something or someone in particular. I went back to the peephole, but it was still too dark to see anything. All I could do was listen. The footsteps stopped again, this time further down the hall. There was a soft thud, followed by an unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. Someone must have forgotten to lock theirs. My stomach dropped. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, listening to the faint sounds of movement coming from the other apartment. After a while, everything went quiet again. No footsteps, no voices. I thought maybe they had left, but I didn't dare open the door to check. The power came back on around 5 a.m. I stayed awake the whole night, sitting on the couch with a kitchen knife in my hand, just in case. When Marcus got home, I told him everything. At first he thought I was overreacting, but then we saw the police cars outside. Turns out, someone had broken into one of the apartments down the hall. The woman who lived there was okay, but they took some of her stuff. Her laptop, some cash, a few other things. She said she'd heard them whispering outside her door before they came in. She hid in her closet and called the cops as soon as she realized what was happening, but the burglars were gone by the time the police arrived. I still don't know who they were or why they picked that night to break in, but the whole thing messed me up. I kept thinking about how they stopped outside my door, how they tried the knob. Now, every time there's a storm or a flicker of the lights, I feel the same knot in my stomach. I double check the locks before bed every night, sometimes 3 or 4 times. And if I ever get another notice about the planned blackout, you can bet I'll be spending the night somewhere else.